Alaska. Her wild beauty is legendary. But this vast, majestic landscape comes with a price.
It's just a land of extreme everything.
Here in the last frontier, cataclysmic natural forces come with the territory. The biggest earthquake in the Northern Hemisphere.
It sounds like a freight train, and it's coming right at you.
The most massive volcanic eruption of the 20th century.
Katmai was many, many, many times bigger than Mount St. Helens was.
Glaciers bigger than a city.
The scope and scale of everything is so crazy.
And the largest tsunami ever witnessed on Earth.
And he said, son, start praying. And I did.
With forces this massive shaping the terrain, it's one of the toughest places on Earth to call home. Welcome to Alaska, Disaster Zone. Deep beneath the rugged land of Alaska, devastating forces are waiting to be unleashed. One of the most powerful can reshape mountain ranges in seconds and leave whole towns in ruin.
California likes to call itself the earthquake capital of the country, but they're not even close. This is earthquake central.
Lori Gillum knows exactly how destructive Alaska's earthquakes can be. She's faced the biggest one in American history. An earthquake for the ages.
It sounds like a freight train, and it's coming right at you.
Lori's home city, Anchorage, lies just north of a deadly subduction zone, where two continental plates are colliding head-on, and one is dragged beneath the other into the Earth's crust. It's what creates Alaska's largest mountain ranges. But it's also the crucible for the biggest and most frequent earthquakes in North America. Alaska averages an astonishing 100 quakes a day, and gets more earthquakes than the other 49 states combined.
If you were to make a list of the top earthquakes in the last 500 years in what's now the United States and Canada, they'd almost all be Alaska.
But the biggest of all comes on March 27, 1964. The day 7-year-old Lori and her sister Debbie are dropped at the 4th Avenue Theater in Anchorage by their mom.
Mom was awesome. At that point in her life, she was a stay-at-home mom, and she volunteered at the elementary school that my sister and I went to, and at church. She was just always there.
Lori thinks she's about to watch Disney's The Sword in the Stone at the theater. Instead, she'll have a front row seat as one of the biggest earthquakes in history unfolds.
Mom bought our tickets, we got popcorn, she sat us down in the theater. She left. We didn't exactly know where she was going, but we kind of figured she'd go shopping.
80 miles away, deep beneath the ocean floor, the crust begins to rupture with a force equivalent to 63,000 atomic bombs. It's the epicenter of a massive quake.
The 1964 earthquake started rupturing underneath Prince William Sound.
But in seconds, the rupture spreads, heading for Anchorage, then a city of 100,000. Beneath the 4th Avenue Theater, the earth begins to tremble.
The curtains part, the movie starts, and Disney starts with the music and the book, Once Upon a Time. And the book opens up, and that's when the earthquake hit. My sister flies over the top of me, throwing her popcorn, and starts running up the aisle. I run after her, and we made it outside when the earthquake was still rolling.
7-year-old Lori witnesses Alaska's fury firsthand.
We were hanging on to the parking meter because by this time the earthquake was really rolling and shaking and we couldn't stand up. And the flagpole is waving back and forth and back and forth, and you can see the rolling waves just come down 4th Avenue as it comes down the street. The curb separated from the sidewalk, and I'm thinking, wow. And it was loud. I remember the noise. It sounds like a freight train, and it's coming right at you.
After 4.5 minutes, the shaking stops.
We were a block and a half up from the 4th Avenue slide, where the sidewalk and the buildings dropped 20 feet and then slid.
The damage you see in the photos from 4th Avenue, for example, were caused by a cliff that basically just collapsed, and whatever was on the top just slid down somewhat to the bottom.
The theater stands its ground, but just 2 blocks away, the J.C. Penney store slumps into the street, killing shoppers.
The corner of the building collapsed. I think my sister was, being 4 years older, was more in tune to what was going on. Her concern was that Mom was in Penny's.
Have Lori's family paid the ultimate price for living in this disaster zone?
This is where we were supposed to meet Mom, at the parking meter. I remember a lady wanted to know if we were okay and if somebody would be coming for us. It felt like we were standing there forever, absolutely forever. I remember her coming around the corner and there was my mom and everything was right with the world.
Lori's family are some of the lucky ones. But their city is devastated. The earthquake rates a 9.2 on the Richter scale, the second largest in world history.
What was exceptional about this earthquake was really the size of the area that slipped. In 5 minutes, this area that's 450 miles long and 150 miles wide moved an average of about 30 feet.
The quake thrusts up whole sections of the seabed. Jetties are left high and dry. And coastlines change so radically, maps have to be redrawn.
The uplift was as big as 30 feet off of the edge of Prince William Sound. So huge amounts of uplift, which all of a sudden brings stuff right out of the ocean.
Also coming out of the ocean immediately after the quake, 30-foot tsunamis. Created by vertical motion of the seafloor, these giant waves devastate southern Alaska and more distant shores.
It went across the ocean, it hit Hawaii, it hit California. And so it killed people in California from the earthquake in Alaska.
The final death toll from the 1964 earthquake and tsunamis stands at over 130. And although that quake is unprecedented in size, since it happened, Alaska's had no less than 6 earthquakes, ranking over magnitude 7.8. The most recent big one in 2002 cleaved massive glaciers in half. And with so many fault lines in southern Alaska, another 1964-size quake isn't out of the question.
It's not likely to get something in the same place of that size, so close to the event, but there's places right next door that could be ready to have a sizable earthquake. So the risk is always there.
One thing's certain, with a population 3 times bigger than 50 years ago, modern Alaska has a lot more to lose. Alaska is a breeding ground for disasters. It has the biggest earthquakes in America, the highest mountains, the most massive glaciers. So what happens when all these forces come together? Ask Howard Ulrich Jr. He's the only man alive who has seen it firsthand.
I saw this big wave. It was coming around on the far side of the island. I was scared, you know.
It's the biggest wave in the history of the United States and potentially in written history.
Lituya Bay, a deceptively tranquil fjord in southeast Alaska. On July 9th, 1958, Howard was just 8 years old when he came here on a fishing trip with his dad.
My father had said it was a good place to spend the night.
But if Howard's father had talked to the native Tlingit people, he might have reconsidered guiding his boat into this glacier-carved bay.
They said there was a monster that lived in the bay, Lituya, and the monster would be displeased if people were there too much.
Little does Howard know, he's about to meet that monster.
It was very quiet, glacier water, chunks of ice, icebergs. All you could hear is the engine just moving. Calm, gray water. Icebergs are not even making hardly a sound. 10:15, we're anchored right here. So I went to bed and went to sleep, I guess. And then my dad came down and woke me up and he said, "Son, you'll never see another earthquake like this in your life."
A fault line in the huge mountains at the head of the bay has spawned a massive quake.
As we're sitting there watching, off to, I think, our right, was a big explosion, a big boom.
40 million cubic yards of rock and ice, dislodged by the earthquake, plunges into the bay.
It came down from a great height, too, so when it hit the bay, at the head of the bay, there was a gigantic splash.
This simulation, created by a scientist at the University of California, explains what happens next. The splash wipes out trees on the adjacent point to a height of over 1,700 feet.
It's bigger than almost every building in the United States. It's around the size of the new World Trade Center.
The displaced water then becomes a wave of devastating power.
It was coming around on the far side of the island, and it was a big black mess. It's got all this dirt, I figure, was making it real black. And it's got these little things sticking out of it like porcupine quills or something, but those are trees inside the rolling black wave.
This is no ordinary wave. Bearing down on Howard and his father is a mega tsunami, the largest ever faced by a human in recorded history.
And my dad, about that time, he threw me the life preserver and he said, "Son, start praying." And I did. Just got a hold of the boat and we went up real fast. It was like being in a nice smooth elevator just going up. There was trees underneath us. We washed up this hill and then washed back down again.
Miraculously, Howard and his father survive. But 2 other boats in the bay are destroyed. 2 survivors are later rescued from a lifeboat. 2 other people are never seen again.
From going to think that you were going to die 1 minute and then survive through it, yeah, we were very lucky. And these people were not.
The 100-foot wave has stripped trees along the shore to the bedrock. Scientists deduce it's not the first time it has happened, and it won't be the last.
Lituya Bay actually has a whole history of big waves, and probably all caused by big landslides.
On average, Lituya Bay has had a mega tsunami every 30 years. And with the last happening 56 years ago, all hell could break loose at any moment.
There's another rip up there waiting to happen. Shortly, any time, overdue.
When you're in the volatile land of Alaska, not everything is what it seems. A meadow isn't just a meadow. It's a grisly grazing patch. A river isn't just a river. It's a salmon superhighway. And sometimes a mountain isn't just a mountain.
We have 52 historically active volcanoes in Alaska. More active volcanoes than anywhere else in the United States by far.
They range from really large ones to small ones and everywhere in between, and with large eruptions and small explosions and everywhere in between.
Alaska's volcanoes include perfect cones like Mount Cleveland in the remote Aleutian chain, or Mount Augustine in Cook Inlet. But there are also less picturesque, but more menacing peaks, like Mount Redoubt, one of the closest volcanoes to Anchorage.
If you see something like Redoubt with a great big breached crater in the top, well, that says to me that it has more violent eruptions.
In this disaster zone, there are 3 to 5 eruptions a year. Here at the Alaska Volcano Observatory, scientists monitor a 2,000-mile-long arc of Alaskan volcanoes. They're an explosive side effect to the continental plates colliding on the so-called Ring of Fire.
We have one plate that's being subducted beneath the other, and that's what generates our unique landscape. Without that, we wouldn't have the volcanoes.
In true Alaskan style, the state holds the record for the biggest eruption of the 20th century. In 1912, Mount Katmai exploded with power 30 times stronger than the lower 48's most famous eruption.
Katmai was many, many, many times bigger than Mount St. Helens was.
Fortunately, most Alaskan volcanoes aren't near where people live. But volcanologist Game Machimsey has been closer than almost any man alive to an eruption at its angriest. It happened in 1992.
On the afternoon of August 18th, we got a phone call from the FAA saying that a pilot had reported something going on at Mount Spur. Spur is about 80 miles due west of Anchorage. It's the closest volcano to the city.
Game hops aboard a small plane to check if the report of an eruption is true.
So we took off, and there was about a 7,500-foot cloud ceiling that day. When we popped through that, it was obvious that this was a major eruption going on.
As they approach Mount Spur, Game starts rolling with his handycam, capturing some of the most violent footage of an Alaskan volcano ever.
It was just exhilarating to see these huge cauliflower, roiling ash clouds coming out of this vent and big blocks the size of Volkswagens and small vans being heaved, 500 meters to 700 meters above the vent.
The massive eruption spews an ash plume over 8 miles into the stratosphere and flings rocks almost 3 miles away from its crater.
But I can remember wondering at the time, wow, we're really close to this, and if it was to go really big, I'm not sure what would happen.
Something else worries Game: the direction the wind is taking the ash cloud.
We noticed the ash is going to Anchorage, so we need to beat this back.
Game's plane lands at Anchorage Airport just before it's shut down. Because if there's one thing Alaskan airports don't take any chances with, it's volcanic ash clouds.
The North Pacific air routes are a very busy air corridor. There's about 250 flights per day, up to maybe 30,000 people on those flights, and then billions of dollars of cargo and equipment. And all of those flights are passing over Alaska's active volcanoes, so potentially in harm's way. I'm standing just inside the inner operations room of the Alaska Volcano Observatory. We use this room primarily when we're having an eruption of one of the Cook Inlet volcanoes, or if there's a large-scale eruption somewhere else in Alaska. And it's a place where we can sit and, at one full sweep of the room, see lots of different data.
There are webcams, seismographs, satellite images, flight trackers, and a special red phone.
This phone has one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to put the people in the ops room in direct contact with the people over at the Federal Aviation Administration, so that in times of volcanic eruption crises, we can speak directly.
Volcanologists know aircraft and ash clouds can be a bad combination. It's a lesson the world learned over Alaskan skies on December 15th, 1989. That morning, Mount Redoubt, 100 miles from Anchorage, erupts. Just as a 747 from Holland is coming in to land at Anchorage Airport. The jet, with 231 passengers, flies straight into the ash cloud.
If you get enough ash into the engines, it will remelt and then essentially solidify in the form of glass on the inside of the engine.
All 4 engines flamed out. The cabin of the plane became very thick with ash. For 5 to 6 minutes, they were a silent, dark, heavy glider. The pilots were desperately trying to restart the engines, and every time they restarted, they were knocking a little bit more ash off of those turbines. Until finally, they got 2 of those engines started, and they limped the plane on into Anchorage, landed, and miraculously, no one was even injured.
The near miss shakes everyone. But it may not be the last. Alaska is crisscrossed with busy international air routes. They can be choked at any time. As happened in Iceland in 2010, when a volcano plume grounded over 100,000 flights. And there's every chance Alaska's next eruption could be the biggest ever, affecting not just aviation, but weather across the globe.
The chances of Alaska experiencing a catastrophic eruption, I think, are fairly good. They happen in Alaska about every 100 years or so. The last one happened in 1912, Katmai. So with as many active volcanoes as we have, with it being so tectonically active up here, It's only a matter of time until we have another Katmai-style eruption.
Coming up, awe-inspiring and deadly. The billion-ton juggernauts reinventing Alaska's most spectacular terrain.
To be near the glacier in that kind of a time would be a frightening experience.
Alaska's majestic mountain ranges are thrust up by deadly tectonic forces. But there's something just as powerful cutting them down.
They can be several miles across and tens of miles long, and as thick as skyscrapers.
Glaciers. Alaska is home to 20,000 of them. And their massive power is morphing this disaster zone in ways you wouldn't believe.
Glaciers in Alaska have really carved most of the landscape.
To see how, glaciologist Mike Heckers and mountain guide Don Riley are on their way to the Mendenhall Glacier to reveal its secrets. They'll be attempting to delve inside it, into a potentially deadly ice cave.
There's an ice cave up there, so we're gonna go check that out and see if it's safe to go in there.
The big danger in an ice cave is that the ceiling's gonna collapse on you.
But before they even get to the glacier itself, there are other hazards.
This is the terminus of the glacier. It's dangerous to get really any closer than this.
Oh, look at this.
This amateur footage taken at Alaska's Holgate Glacier shows why.
Oh, here you go, more.
Icebergs break off into the water, and we call that iceberg calving. The scale ranges from, basketballs of ice falling off to basically pieces of ice the sizes of small cities breaking off.
Here comes the water.
If you get a big piece that hits flat, then there will be this huge wave. To be in a boat near the glacier in that kind of a time would be a frightening experience.
We'll be all right.
At the so-called terminus, the glacier's power is at its most raw and unpredictable.
It's kind of like a slinky pulling apart. So the ice is coming down, flowing by gravity and being pushed from above and coming over this cliff and just breaking apart.
This is where the glacier ends. But to discover where it begins means going to the source of its immense power. On the flanks of the monumental Mendenhall Towers, a death-defying peak, where mountain guide Dawn feels right at home.
So we're up here at 5,500 feet, and we're up in the Juneau ice field. And up here, we get more snow each year than can melt.
So once you get about 90 feet of snow piled up over the years, just the sheer weight of it will compact and form glacial ice. And it's heavy enough that it flows downhill just like a river does.
The ice's journey to the glacier's end takes 200 years.
They're big conveyor belts. They're moving the ice down through the mountains.
But glaciers take with them a secret weapon: rocks, dragged from the mountainsides. They're what make glaciers able to reshape Alaska.
The ice itself does not actually carve valleys, but the rocks that are embedded in the ice that are carried down act as a big Brillo pad and just scrape away at the rock below. So you have classic U-shaped valleys where glaciers have been, and we can see that up on the Mendenhall.
Add giant glaciers to ever-shifting tectonic plates, and you get the extreme landscapes Alaska's famous for.
When you get the combination of the tectonics pushing things together and pushing things up, and glaciers cutting down through them, then what you get is really, really steep relief. And so this very, very rugged, dynamic topography.
Here in Southeast Alaska, you can hardly look anywhere without seeing how glaciers have affected the landscape. Anywhere from the rounded peaks that the glaciers have gone right over the top and smoothed them over. Even most of the waterways are actually fjords where the glaciers have carved them out.
Just as a river forms whitewater, a glacier will splinter as it hugs a bend in the valley, or crack as it falls down steeper slopes. The result? Some of the most dramatic and forbidding terrain on Earth.
The analogy to a waterfall in a glacier is an ice fall. So if you go over a steep slope, the ice will get all broken up and move real fast. So where the change in speed is the greatest is where you'll form crevasses.
Reaching up to 100 feet down towards the glacier's frozen heart, crevasses are cracks in the brittle surface of the ice. Ice near the surface is weathered and shows up white or gray, while the newly exposed ice at the bottom of the crevasse is a vivid blue. It's a world that is always moving and always demanding respect.
You always have to be thinking ahead, thinking about what's underneath you. If you're walking around on snow, you might have crevasses underneath you. They're always changing, they're always doing something interesting.
Like rivers, glaciers are joined by other glaciers as they travel downhill.
So right down here, we've got the south branch of the Mendenhall Glacier, and you can see where the rock is being kind of pulled off. And if you think of glaciers as rivers, when you get two of these rivers that come together, the rock that was on their side will then be forced out in between them, and that's what's called a medial moraine.
The rocks that used to be on the side of each branch are now in the middle of the main branch. So if you count the medial moraines in a glacier, you can know how many tributaries upstream join together to form that main branch.
Just as the glacier transforms the landscape, it's also being transformed itself. One of the main forces of change is water.
Glaciers have their own plumbing system that helps to get water, both rain and then the melt that happens on the glacier surface, away from the glacier. It usually starts out that the melt percolates through the snow if it's there, and then it'll start flowing across the ice. And if there's any sort of fractures or cracks, crevasses in the ice, those crevasses will steer the water as it forms rivers. We call them superglacial streams. Then, at some point, the water will make its way to the glacier bed, and that feature is called a moulin, which is a French word for a mill. And moulins tend to form where there's a weakness, some sort of a crack in the ice. That's a place where the water can actually go, sometimes all the way down to the bed of the glacier, hundreds of meters through the glacier ice.
But to truly understand a glacier's devastating power, you have to see its most ancient ice up close. Mike and Dawn have just found the ideal place to do it. A glacial ice cave. But it's unstable. Formed from moving ice that could shift at any moment.
What do you think, Mike?
I don't know. I don't like the look of this crack right here.
In 2013, a glacial ice cave collapsed in Oregon, killing a 25-year-old snowboarder.
The ice is moving, the ice is melting.
You can see it's already broken up there, and there's a lot of light coming through that thin ice.
Alaska is a land shaped by awe-inspiring forces. Giant earthquakes, towering volcanoes, and glaciers that would cover Manhattan 3 times over. These enormous slabs of ice have the power to grind mountains to dust. To understand how, you have to venture where most don't dare. Into the glacier's frozen heart. A potentially deadly ice cave.
Wow.
You can see these cracks where it's really thin right in there. So this whole section could come down.
You've got a dynamic environment in which you're visiting, and there's always potential for something to go wrong.
I think we should go in on this side.
Yeah, that looks better.
Cool.
Glaciologist Mike Heckers and mountain guide Dawn Riley carefully pass through the unstable entrance. Inside, a cavern of otherworldly wonder.
Look at this ceiling.
This is gravy.
It's probably, what, 20 feet of ice above us, maybe?
Towering over their heads, enough ice to fill 10 Olympic swimming pools. If the glacier shifts, it could all come crashing down.
I mean, it's amazing, these features. You can see some of these bubbles and cracks. Yeah. See a big boulder up there. This is really one of the most amazing features here on the Mennonites Glacier. This ice cave, you can see by the colors and the shapes you can see on the walls. It's just really magnificent.
Within this ice, the secret to how glaciers pack such a giant geological punch. Its clarity means it's super dense. 3 times heavier than the snow that created it, making the glacier like a billion-ton steamroller on the land.
This is really cool.
So smooth.
You can see how it's just kind of flowing over these rocks.
Yeah.
Can't find glass sculpture that nice, and it's natural.
Ice caves are temporary. Some collapse after just a few days, others after a few years. At any one time, there might be dozens of them in Alaska, though most will be too remote or dangerous to enter. They're dynamic natural wonders created by water and wind.
This ice cave is formed by the heat from this creek right here and the wind blowing through here, just basically melting and sculpting the walls as the heat flows through.
This cave is unusually large because it's drawing air not from one entrance, but from 2.
Ah, look at this. I think I even see blue sky up there.
This shaft was first cut by water boring down from the glacier's surface, a feature called a moulam. Over time, it's been widened by the warm air, like the cave.
There's a nice cross ventilation blowing in here. Warm air from the forest up there is just coming right in through here.
Constant melting creates one of this cave's most striking features.
You can see the sculpted ice on the side. It's caused by differential melting, just by streams of air blowing through here and water trickling down in some places and not in others. Where it's trickling down, it's going to melt more. So you get these really fascinating shapes. Oh yeah, you can see water coming right down this edge.
So you were saying that's what kind of carves this sculptedness, is
Right,
kind of how
yeah.
the water's running?
It's a little differential melting with water flowing down on these edges, kind of eating it away and then starts somewhere else.
Glacial ice absorbs all the colors of the visible light spectrum except blue, which it transmits in a brilliant hue. The longer light travels through the ice, the more blue the ice appears. But in this disaster zone, nothing stays the same for long.
The ice cave here is always changing. So more ice will collapse near the entrance, probably this summer and over the next year or so. And within a couple years, this ice cave probably won't be here.
Beneath an ancient Alaskan glacier, an ice cave receives a visitor from another world.
What's great about the quadcopters is that we can get into places that are really dangerous.
Fitting into, extremely tiny places, into crevasses, into glaciers.
You can get shots no one's ever seen before.
To better understand this last frontier, Christopher Carson and Lion Elaton are ushering in a new era of exploration. They're looking for an undocumented ice cave, a place human eyes have never seen before.
Check that out down there.
Is that one?
Maybe.
We walked all along the ice right alongside the glacier, and we found a new one.
Gosh.
Oh, man, look at that.
That is amazing.
They're not sure how stable it is or how deep beneath the glacier it goes. For a human to go down there might be deadly. So they've enlisted some high-tech help.
This is our quadcopter. This is used to record all of our aerial shots. It has a HD minicam and 9-inch blades that keeps it up in the air. It's gyro stabilized so that no matter where you turn it, it stays in that same area.
Over the past months, they've used their quadcopter to reveal views of glaciers that have never been captured before.
Being, from what we've researched, the first person to ever fly a drone into an ice cave, we haven't found a single person to do that, and it's really exciting.
Exciting for Chris, but high risk for this delicate craft.
The challenges are insane, absolutely insane. From wind to rain to turbulence.
You don't want to crash, obviously.
But today's cave is extra challenging. The quadcopter will be flying out of sight, so they'll have to rely on video beamed to a monitor from the copter's camera.
So we have one person that is actually flying the quadcopter, and the other person is monitoring the actual shot and what's going on within that shot.
Lose signal in this ice cave, and it could be curtains for their $4,000 quadcopter.
So there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and you can lose your drone any which way.
Watch out on the right.
So one of the obvious challenges was the degree to which the ice cave actually descended.
Turn a little left.
All right.
All right, good.
Okay, I'm about to go out of sight, though.
You drop down into it, and there's water falling everywhere. It's dark, and you have to go in at an angle. We had no visuals, so we're flying only off the monitor.
Look at that. I think it goes all the way down, maybe like 30 more feet. That's amazing.
They discover a subglacial tunnel running deep beneath crystalline ice.
The ice cave was absolutely amazing. Very, very deep blues. Feet into it.
They're capturing never-before-seen views.
Perfect, beautiful.
Now, all they need to do is bring the copter back.
A little more towards us. Keep going. I can't see.
We're starting to lose signal.
All right, be careful.
All right, I'm gonna angle up. When you lose signal, you are flying blind. There's nothing else you can do.
Wait, come back, come back.
All right, all right.
I can't see. Did you crash?
It's done.
You crashed it.
It's done.
I didn't know if it fell into an abyss somewhere.
The quadcopter has crashed near the entrance, where the cave is most dangerously unstable.
All right, you have to go get it.
You go get it. I'm not gonna go. You crashed.
He wanted me to go down there, but he was the one who lost it, so it was only fair that he get it back.
I'll hold on to everything for you. I think you got it.
I'll get it, I'll get it.
Despite the risk, Chris isn't prepared to abandon his quadcopter.
Ice caves are really dangerous. I mean, these things calve or collapse all the time.
You got it. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Chris, like a true champion, went down and he got it back.
Their quadcopter is damaged, but its camera still captures a few fleeting images. Portraits of a hidden world, probably already consumed by change in this volatile land.
These things are melting so fast and moving so fast that some of these shots that we get might never be seen again. So it's pretty humbling to be able to see it, you know, for the first time.
Ever-changing, dangerous, unpredictable. Life in Alaska means facing forces of devastating strength. But without them, Alaska wouldn't be the wonder she is.
Nothing comes for free. I mean, if you have beautiful volcanoes, there's the danger of eruption. When you've got these steep mountains, there's the danger of landslides.
Despite the disastrous risks, or maybe because of them, Alaska's wild beauty will always draw us back to this last frontier.